Welcome to Oromo Affairs. Welcome to Oromo Affairs. As you know, this is Ace Drew, your host. I try to keep it very intellectual at the same time, very funny, like David Letterman. This is the conversation for East Africa and the minorities in America. So I have tonight a special guest. His name is Mark Koran. He's a senator from the state of Minnesota. We're going to talk about frauds, crimes, and election. So Senator Mark, welcome to the show. Say hello to
Hey,
my East Africans, all in general, and especially the Oromos. As you can see,
hello,
the
hello everyone. It's wonderful to
relationship
be
between
here.
us and Oromo is what's possible to bring peace, and that's what we're going to talk about today. Government,
Great. It's wonderful to be here. Thanks, Ace.
for sure, for sure. Mark, you came on my show before. You and I talked on the show before. We talked about
Yes.
Second Amendment, how important Second Amendment is, and
Yes, we did.
today crime is in there. So we're going to talk about more security today too. So as you know, Mark, the biggest news in Minnesota is about this fraud. This fraud. I'm sorry, I messed up the screen a little bit. Feeding our future fraud, Mark. Tell me about this fraud, man. You're in the Minnesota government. You make the rules and regulation. How did this happen, and whose fault is this, man? Let me know.
Yeah.
Whose fault is this? Somebody got to be
Yeah.
accountable for it. Who should we hold accountable, Mark? As the people, who should we vote out of the office this coming November?
When you look at it, Ace, you look at these dollars were designed to feed from the Department of Agriculture, and it was actually sent through to be managed by the Minnesota Department of Education to feed children through the pandemic, and it's still going on today. Um, it was designed, and who to blame, right? The basic checks and
Mhm.
balances of trying to discover fraud, or the basic checks and balances, and making sure qualified entities receive dollars, right? And almost all of our nonprofits, I prefer to call them nonprofiteers,
Mhm.
because very few truly nonprofits. And when you look at it, they failed at the fundamental basics in the process of this granting out, and almost exclusively to a very small group of people, the first $250 million. $250 million. And I think the average cost is they normally get reimbursed about $2 a meal. So they're
Mm.
claiming that they fed 125 million meals to children in Minnesota for that period of time, for the first $250 million. Remember, Ace, they're in the middle right now of spending another $250 million. So $500 million has been sent to Minnesota to be managed by the Department of Education and distributed to these nonprofits. They failed the basics. They failed the
Wow.
basics. When you look at the organization Feeding Our Future, one of the umbrella organizations who then helped bring in all of these other nonprofits in getting the grants pushed out to them. I don't think they did the basic background checks. Did they ensure that these entities were actually capable? Do they have a facility? They did none of those things. I
Nope.
think in indictment number 49, we're talking about
Yeah.
over
Anyone came
40,
in.
almost 50 people.
Yeah.
He was a media company working out of a tiny little office, and I think he was claiming to feed 1,500 people twice a day, seven
Wow.
days a week, Case. And that's what all of them are. And so, did they look at those entities and say, well, wonder how a media company would be able to provide, right? They have no history of food production capabilities, resources, or anything. They still granted them millions of dollars. The other thing is, this is as simple as it gets from an oversight perspective. When you look at the numbers of people, I think out in Wilmer, there was one or two different entities in the city of Wilmer that was feeding more than the number of children that exist in the city. When they look at the checks and balances, they were making up names. If you saw, they were using some internet random name generator to create the names of the kids they were feeding. In one of those in the federal investigation, I think there were 25 students or 25 names who matched the school roster for the region in which they were applying this. This is outright blatant theft from the very beginning, and they did nothing or very little to stop it. When you look at what they did, they said they discovered it. Well, I would imagine you discovered it. When you look at the sheer volume of who the people were, the number of meals they were supposedly being served, and what the heck, what infrastructure it would take to distribute $250 million worth of meals. They had none of it. None
And
of
that's
that
what made it a
infrastructure
crime.
existed. And when I look at it, much like all the other fraud, I just had a Health and Human Services report from the legislative auditor that says $140 million they looked at, and they failed most of the kind of oversight and auditing and in the basic checks to make sure
So
there isn't
when
conflicts of interest.
when they saw it, like when they saw it, that Feeding the Future is billing more than the St. Paul and Minneapolis public schools, why didn't they say this is just a big old, big old, big old red flag?
Yeah, but I think what you'll discover is most of it appears to be almost a friends and family plan, right?
Right.
We're for enforcement, and in this case, the attorney general should have engaged immediately
One of them
when they
was
discovered
one of them
when
was
they
10 families.
what's that?
One of them it was like six siblings.
Yes. Oh, yeah.
They were all like 1 or a year and a half apart in ages too.
Yes, and you
That's
see
crazy.
all of it. They didn't do the basic things, and so they didn't want to be seen, right? The Governor Walz, he'd been very quiet on this. He lied on it about what they were required to do by the judge. When they went to the judge, or when the judge sought to stop the feeding, and when they get sued, think about the emboldenedness. This organization knows they were stealing hundreds of millions of dollars, and they had the nerve to sue the government to continue payments for services they're not providing.
Man,
The Department of Education on that court case, they said, right, the response to the judge that said, well,
wow.
these nonprofits were in good standing. They had an opportunity to present their case. It was in good standing. I don't think you could say that about anybody involved in this, that they could be deemed in good standing. And so then they lied about who required, or that they were not required to restart those payments. And every one of those dollars, the vast majority, they're gone. They're not going to be able to recapture them. And then
Yeah.
think about the basic, Ace, to
Okay, on
stand
that,
out.
if the most of the money is gone, what will happen to these fraudsters?
Well, at the federal level, it looks like they're going to be going to prison. They've been indicted, right? So now they'll be going through lengthy trials. But when you look at it, they failed. They've found very few, if any, invoices where they even purchased food to serve to
Right.
other people. And so I think there's going to be a lot of people going to prison. And of course, any
So
resources that they
let's just say for $10 million, for how many years do you think they'll go to prison?
Oh, I think they're looking at 5+ years, and or more.
That's
And
it for $10 million.
yeah, I don't know what it'll be. I think the
Would
opportunity
most
could be
people
far.
make $10 million in 5 years?
Oh, no. So let's just hope they go to
Gee,
prison. Let's hope they go to prison. I think thank God it's at the federal level, because there's a chance they're going to go to prison. But think about in our Minnesota courts. Ties into our later conversation about crime, but our Minnesota courts, they'd be unlikely in Minnesota state courts, they'd be unlikely to see any jail term, period. They're not putting people in jail for violent crimes against people, more or less what they would consider a white collar crime.
man, that is
So
very unfortunate. That's some weak rules. If somebody's gonna steal $10 million and all they're gonna serve is 4 to 5 years,
yeah, I don't know what it is, but let's
a
hope it's
lot of people will
meaningful.
take risk in
Yeah.
frauding more.
But look at the people. Look at the people who were involved in this. Many of them were on government benefits and went and suddenly became a multimillionaire. That's real. I mean, that's just theft. It's theft of vital resources to take care of our children, vital theft of resources to take care of our disabled, our elderly, everybody in there. That's theft, and it has a real impact on real people. But for the agencies to willfully allow this at such scale, if you read some of the information, because the Department of Education wasn't acting quick enough, the chief of Feeding Our Future, they entered into an agreement that they must process their applications in a more expedient manner. So the agency for just decided to make that agreement, and maybe they shouldn't be processing them as quickly as they should, because they should have been doing their due diligence across the board. That's what they were there for. They have an obligation, and they hid behind, well, this is an emergency. We had all people starving out there, and under COVID, they weren't able to do these things. Well, I'm sorry. It's their job. State law requires it. Federal law requires it. It's the fundamental basics, and they failed. And they failed numerous times across many programs. Governor Walz knows it. Keith Ellison knows it. All of them know it. The Commissioner of Department of Education, and heck, I'd throw in there Department of Health and Department of Human Services. This is occurring across the board on a regular basis.
So what happens now? Now we know that the FBI is handling it. Now they're getting caught, but those criminals, unfortunately, it looks like they're only going to get 4 to 5 years.
Well,
that what about the politicians that let it happen for this money that we're not going to recover? And the Judge Guthman, he came back, he fired it back, and he said he never issued in order for the Education Department to continue the payment. So the judge, it looks like the judge is free because they never found the issued order from the judge.
It was unprecedented for a judge to come out and basically say, hey, the governor lied, Keith Ellison lied. And the only way to stop these things, or to put focus on it and redirect those resources so they actually do their job, is you need to unelect Governor Walz, Keith Ellison. They all need to be replaced, because they know what's going on, and they need to build in the accountability and ensure that we are complying with state law, and we're preserving every one of those dollars. Those dollars come out of your wallet, right? They come out of every single person that lives in this country. It's coming out of your wallet, and they should respect that, and they've failed. And again, this is just one program. Ace, if you listen to Lugar, he is part of the Attorney General's office at the federal level. But if you listen to Lugar, the $250 million is just the floor. That's where they're at today in the investigation. There's another $250 million that they have to go out and check to see and verify, how far does this go? Who else is involved? And they're going to do it. It appears, I'm kind of shocked they're actually prosecuting it. And thank God they are. But they're doing it because Minnesota, the Walz administration, Attorney General Ellison, they didn't want to be seen prosecuting these Somali businesses who are stealing by the hundreds of millions. They didn't want to be seen. And they've continually done this across all opportunities because their fear of being called racist. And in fact, I think that's what they've implied every time. If you look at all of the other people involved, did you look in to see how many of these people that were involved made maximum contribution donations to their favorite elected officials?
Democrats.
Yeah, it just happened to be all Democrats, from the mayor's office in Minneapolis, Jamal Osman.
Some of them are your fellow senators.
Yes, and I think Senator Fateh has 11 of those people made donations.
$1,000 from all of them.
Yeah,
almost all of them.
And that's just 11 of them that we know about. And so then I think two of the people who are indicted are also his cousins. And then you go to Jamal Osman, it's I thought I read that 3 of the people that he brought in to be key advisors in the city of Minneapolis leadership are all 3 indicted. Jamal Osman himself one of the nonprofits that he founded, and he supposedly signed over to somebody else and had no idea what they were going to do with it. They were indicted, and he hasn't been indicted yet. Hopefully
So you
there's
think, because since this is, it's all like Democrats, so many Democrats, the officials, the business people, they're also involved in it. Like in terms of just getting a little bit of cut of this cheese, this 250 million,
I
they all got tiny cut from it.
I
So you think
Ace,
are they gonna,
but
FBI gonna look into all of them?
I believe it looks like they're going to look into all of them. And think about this: why would they willfully ignore this or allow the ineffectiveness of government? That's one way to get the money, but this is willful non-prosecution, right? They've done everything they could to make sure that they were not going to be the prosecutors. And I think I'm even shocked that they called anybody out. I am assuming the Department of Education acted because of some whistleblower of some sort that this is going to hit the news, and they had to look like they were going to do something without actually doing anything. But look at the cycle. They throw these hundreds of millions of dollars out in the cities of St. Paul and Minneapolis, right? They want to buy voting loyalty, and they know those dollars come back. Not only that, in the efforts, the volunteers, or not volunteers, when you're feeding these nonprofits, they go out and campaign. They're being paid with our dollars. These dollars clearly are coming back into their coffers through their election campaigns.
Right.
And what other ways are they coming through? They know that. The willful ignorance to allow this to occur. And remember, this isn't just the only program. This is one where it's absolutely the most egregious. I think they're pretty comfortable that they were not going to be prosecuted or even investigated, nor prosecuted, and nobody in Minnesota actually did anything. They pushed it off, probably reluctantly, off to the federal government, and they're actually doing something. And I'm actually kind of surprised they are, because they know, right, even at the federal level,
It
where's
was just
Ilhan?
a lot. It's just too hard to hide.
Where's Ilhan Omar in this, right? She spoke favorably. She's on record of feeding our future in the videos.
Right.
She really supports these people. They all know.
Where is
To
she
say
now?
you don't know what's going on,
Unfortunately, her district still remain the poorest in the state. And
eh,
however, Ilan Omar is now worth 3 million.
yeah.
So
You look at
that's
the
the unfortunate case on that.
Yeah, but you
No.
look at them; they're all tied to a very select group of elected officials, and they are working
Who are
willingly and
eating?
hand in
All of
hand.
them are eating at the expenses of the poor,
Absolutely, and
at the expenses of making a promise to the poor.
absolutely. Again, dependency is their fuel, and so you look at it from the school system, right, all the way through the entire process. How do we keep this victimhood mentality, and that it's somebody else being the oppressor? And the reality is, it's the very same people. I've said forever, Ace, practically most of us never plan to be in these offices. But you go out there and
Do
you become vocal because you want accountability and transparency in your government. When you see these things occurring, it's crazy and disgusting, you
right.
know? And then when you see the life cycle of how it feeds itself, and I've said forever, there's more people working to keep those they claim to support the most impoverished than those of us working to provide opportunity to achieve greatness. And that truly does still exist in this country, right? It really does. But when
The
you get
sad
in
thing,
there,
what's the so sad about this thing when you kind of deeply look at it is that they were all registered as 501c3, right?
oh
They're not
yes,
even registered as private LLC.
oh yeah. That's the whole government industry. That it's the dependency industry. It's what it is. It's very, very large. Ace, there are hundreds of nonprofits in St. Paul, Minneapolis, in the big metro areas, Duluth. You pick any of those largely
Right.
blue cities. It's literally an industry
Right.
that very few of those dollars actually touch the people of need, or at least the defined people of need. And And I don't know that there's been an improvement in any statistical category of the area they're attempting to resolve, right? Think about it.
I like
Helping,
at the international level, they call it these organizations. They organize themselves at international level too. This is what they stole locally. These people are like expanding it to international with that money. What do you think they're gonna do? And they say they ran to Turkey and Kenya and
oh,
Ethiopia. so,
absolutely.
so this is
And
what they called over there. They called non-government organizations, right? NGOs.
yep, yep,
Now, how are they non-government, or how are they even non-profit if these people are going to make that much money? It's They cannot be non-government because their funding comes from the government.
it is. And it's just a
Like
term. It
$250 million, that's the government money.
Yeah. And they call them NGOs, right? They become an operating arm of the government in many cases, right? They're doing the work, typically the work that a private sector wouldn't do, right? Or there's no revenue side of it. But they've become an industry living off dependency, right? And they feel it. All government wins. All government wins at every level. The more people they have dependent, they need more
And they
jobs, more
only
people.
thrive in a big government,
Yep,
where big government has killed all the private industries. And
yep,
all these non-profiters, at the expenses of saying, I'm going to serve you the poor, will eat and we stay poor.
yep. And they have no accountability, Ace, at any level. And again, tell me one area where they've improved on any of the programs in which they've created. They haven't. There's been, in fact, all of them have grown in need because of the very behavior and how the monies are spent, right? There's some good, don't get me wrong. There's
You
great
know,
people
you
out
know
there.
what's so similar to Ethiopia about a big government like this? About somebody who wants to be a dictator and run it by himself? In
Yep,
Ethiopia, the current prime minister wrote a book on how everybody can be only one party, his party. And it's great for Ethiopia because everybody's under his party. Now,
yep.
to sell this book to the population, he
And Ace, what they're trying to
took
do, you
he took
look at,
$20 million from the Oromia Region Education Fund account
yep,
to sell
you,
his book. He took money out of the Oromia Education account.
yeah, you look
So
at it
that's
all
what
over.
happens when you get a giant government. You have no say. He can spend your children's money on anything he wish.
Yep. Look what happens. Look what's happened today with the willful withholding of information, the lack of transparency of our government, and their desire when they claim to be very tolerant, but they don't appear to be very tolerant in thought that differs from theirs. And it's like in this world, it's not about you're free to agree with us. You're free to think independently in this country, and you should have healthy skepticism. Now, if you have healthy skepticism of government, you're somehow a radical. Give me a break.
Okay?
That's a core of our country. Healthy skepticism, trust and verify, and our government should be accountable and transparent. And this administration, the Walls administration, remember, I think earlier, maybe we weren't recording yet, but Governor Walls won't meet with most elected officials. I have been unable to get a meeting in 4 years with Governor Walls. I'm a state elected official. In
Dictator
many
style.
cases, it's crazy.
Just like that's what the Ethiopian prime minister does. He got this other party, right? They have zero power. He doesn't talk to them.
But here's the reality is he doesn't meet with most of his Democrat elected officials either. And so he's a very, very small group of people. And it's those that are driving all of this, all the division, all the re-racialization of this country, and selling the victimhood. And then look what's happening. Crime is going out of this world, right? The economy and schools. All of those things are failing miserably, and it's hurting the absolute people that they claim. And I say they claim to support the most, right? They talk about they want to support the minority population. Yeah, we want to support everybody. We want to make sure everybody has the greatest opportunity. It's their mantra, and everything they do absolutely hurts that population the most. Absolutely does. And education or whatever, every one of them. But in this case, think about that $250 million. They
Right.
will recapture what they can, right? They've frozen whatever assets they can get a hold of. They'll go out and try to recover as much as they can. But you know, and I know that most of those dollars are gone, and the
Two
ability to
luxury
recover them.
cars, two mansions. Those realtors
Yeah.
got paid. Like those people didn't know this was a corruption money, so they were just
Well,
doing
how
their
about
normal job. So all those private businesses cannot really give the money back because they would
is it?
lose it.
It goes even a little bit further. Let's go back to the beginning. Where there are investigations, when you go to the bank, and all of these, we I know there's portions of the population that used to not, from a religious perspective, not do banking. Well, today you're doing banking in this country.
For sure.
There's no way you're receiving a government payment without having a bank account.
Right.
And so you have a bank account, but if you have a a transaction over $10,000, those are
Right.
to be remitted, right? It's called the
Yeah.
cash transaction report at the banks. So what did those look like? They also have a suspicious activity report, you
Right.
know, and even at a basic level, how many of the people here were receiving government benefits from an
Right.
entitlement who were now receiving millions of dollars from their business?
Mm-hmm.
Come on, that doesn't happen. So there's
Right.
a whole host of those things that should have raised many red flags. What about the bank industry? And I actually have questions about that. Did the bank industry, are they afraid of being called racists too? Is that why they didn't, did they submit them? I want to see those. I want to
Um,
know that every single cash transaction report, because we have the Hawala process too as well, right? So to be able to move money in large cash denominations through the Minneapolis St. Paul airport, I have been trying for the last 8 months. So, Ace, do you remember the child care fraud investigation in
yeah.
2017?
Yeah.
So it was purported probably $100 million, and this is insiders said they think there's $100 million in theft in that child care.
Right.
Again, the very same population and the very same people were involved in it. And at that time, somebody provided the number of the dollars going through Minneapolis, St. Paul. At that time in 2017, it was $100 million in cash that went through Minneapolis, St. Paul Airport.
Wow.
And what does that look like today with the theft of $250 million from just a small handful of people? How did
And
those dollars
so
get
weird.
out? How did they get out of this country? And
So
how
crazy.
much
It
today?
happened what in
How
19 months?
what's that?
They collect more in like 19 months, man. It happened so quick.
Oh, yeah. And what's that total dollar? I can tell you, not a single entity, legal entity that has, you have to do, there's all those dollars are declared through the MSP through this Hawala process. Nobody will cough up what those dollars are today.
Exactly.
I think we'd all be shocked because this theft that's occurring from our government is not limited to this $250 million. It's happening every day across the whole variety of programs. Medicaid as a consumer, Medicaid equipment, Medicaid transportation, adult daycare, child daycare, all of them still
It's crazy,
have
Mark. We're gonna move on to the second topic too. But
excellent.
go ahead. You got something to finish? Go ahead,
No,
finish.
no, it's excellent. The
But
string,
I
what
do have a
people,
closing question for you on this one, though.
yeah.
But Abu Abagada, sometimes I post a comment from the viewers so that way I get to engage them that way too. So he says, how can they recapture back these 250 millions? If these money is gone, what is going to happen to those scammers? Are they going to be put behind bars for the rest of their life? Abdul, we talked about this a little while ago, but there is like 50 of them, and it's more than 50 down the line they're gonna bring in, but it looks like they all average about 8 million, 7 million, 10 million a piece, and Amy might average like very high, but so for 8 to 10 million, Mark thinks you think about 4 to 5 years, right? We don't really know
Well,
yet.
Ace, I don't know if it's 4 to 5 years. That should be the minimum for anybody involved in this. So
Right.
hopefully they get much longer terms. But with that, They
Since they
have,
have a lot of Democrat friends, we think.
uh, and think about what they've done, right? Prosecutors and judges. That's why they didn't pursue this in Minnesota. And in the Minnesota controlled investigation and oversight in the judicial side, they didn't do it. And so it's at the federal level. Thank God they're doing it. There's going to be many more people. They will recapture every asset they can find. And we do have, I don't know all of the opportunities, but they will find them no matter where they are around the world. For a crime this large, they will likely be finding these people for the next few years who have fled the country, hiding from this theft. So I'm confident that Lugar's on it, and that they're going to see many more people. So
For sure, for sure. Mark, last question. As a solution, I always talk about problem and then I don't leave until I touch on the solution. So right now, the mansion, the Democrats got the mansion, meaning they got the governor,
yes,
and they also got the House, right?
they do. Yes,
And we have the Senate
correct, by one vote.
just by one vote. That's the difficulty. Yeah, that's unfortunately the difficulty. So, what are you guys gonna do to fight them on this? To make the rules maybe stronger? Like, what is the Senate thinking about this?
Yeah, well, I think across the board, people need to realize that this environment has been created. The lack of prosecution of all types of crimes across the board lay at the governor's feet. He has chosen to do nothing about it. It falls on the attorney general, and it's time for change. And for us, we're going to do everything we can to win back and make sure we have the majority in the Senate, take the House. And it's really about oversight. Many of these things, how do we embed that oversight? I chair the Legislative Audit Commission that actually is the only entity that oversees the legislative auditor, which does that type of auditing in state government. They're the only entity who audits state government. And
And
so I look at
the
it.
senators in there, right? In
What's
that
that?
audit committee,
What was that, Ace?
the state senators are in one of that committee, right?
That committee, the Legislative Audit Commission, is six representatives, six senators, and the legislative auditor, not the state auditor. The legislative auditor actually reports to the legislature. I
Okay.
will likely bring forth a bill to add additional resources, and we're going to have to put a full-time team looking at all of those elements of compliance on all entitlement programs on an ongoing basis. I've already had the framework, been working on for the last year and a half, 2 years. We need to do things that we've never done before, and maybe provide some oversight committees, and try to pull back the control, because the government entities themselves, not the executive branch, the governor or his appointees,
For sure.
this is embedded in the operational side of government. The full-time state employees, they choose what they want to enforce, what they don't. They also choose what they to write rules. They do these rulemaking procedures where they're technically writing law. We have to pull those back. Those things should not be done and created by unelected people. That should be back at the legislature. So your voice is heard, and we're the ones who represent everybody's voice at the legislature. They've removed us in so many ways, and you can see the gross overreach in their power, either willfully or incompetently allowing these things to occur on a
For sure.
continuous basis.
For sure. Please connect me to an. If you're in that committee, we'll keep following up together. Then, if you're not on that committee, please connect me to somebody on that
I'll,
committee from the
I'll be
Senate.
on that. I'm the chair of that committee right now. I will be on that committee as we move forward. The chair will go back to the House. It goes back from the House and the Senate every 2 years or every legislative session. It's a great committee, but it is about the legislative auditor and making sure they have the resources to really go and dig in. In fact, what you'll see is because of the things we talked about, it's really in the grant programs. The legislature directed the legislative auditor to go after 3 large grants. So a report's going to come out in March about the operational aspects of feeding our future, the Southwest Light Rail, where we're talking about hundreds of millions of dollars that in these grant programs. And so they're going to have a very detailed report about what they did or didn't do in the operational compliance as it relates to state law or otherwise. That report, part of that's being done right now. And those reports, those investigations typically take a year. And so, and I know the legislative auditor, they work hand in hand. If they suspect fraud, they work hand in hand with the federal investigators, FBI, BCA. They do that on a regular basis. So we have a lot of work to do about how we define and maybe provide some additional resources for that legislative auditor to really focus on this grant program and maybe restructure the agencies or all agencies to provide separate structure for those that do grants. We have to have that insight. And rarely is the legislature provided with the great detail of how they issue those grants. We're going to really need to look. It's billions of dollars over a biennium every year or every biennium.
So just in case, Mark, just in case, when people do these kind of scams and frauds, they usually be giving each other gifts. According to the FBI reports, there was a lot of jewelries bought. There was a lot of vacations been taken. A lot of nice cars been purchased. So let's just say the Department of Education secretary is getting some jewelry from these Feeding the Future associates. Who can fire him? Can the Senate fire him? Can the House fire him? Can the government fire him?
So the state employees are state employees, but the agency head, the commissioner of the Department of Education, or any commissioner, that falls on the Senate. I think we removed 3 commissioners, which is almost unprecedented because of their lack of failure or their willful desire to implement their political agenda outside of state law and outside of the legislature. So we got rid of 3 of them: MPCA, Department of Labor and Industry, and I forget.
Can't the Senate bring him in for a testimony and twist his arm and find out who's lying, the judge or the governor? He can tell us.
Ace, what you'll find out is they're very good. They're professional diverters. They tell you very little. In fact, I would argue almost exclusively the leadership that the governor's brought in, what they willfully withhold from us is more damaging than the lies they tell us. Rarely do they provide the information that's public, that's actually by statute should be public data. They willfully withhold that from the legislature. It's one of the things, the fastest growing complaint we have in government today through the legislative auditor, and then there's another process, the administrative law judge process, is public data requests. They just refuse to respond to them. If it doesn't show them in good light, or they just want to withhold that information, they don't. They withhold. They don't comply, and that's got to stop.
That's crazy. That's crazy. Well, Mark, I hope you keep working hard on that issue.
Oh, yeah.
Because imagine, man, this is East Africa, man. We're really, really oppressed people. We got similar crooks. This is a small percentage of people, not even, it's like 0.005% ruined our lives in Africa. They follow us in America, and they do the same thing, and they give us bad rep in America.
And the Democrats here are selling the same garbage, and it's always under the guise of kindness and compassion, and it's neither. It's neither. And but they will say many crazy things. It's as if the Republicans are going to be the ones that are oppressing. Look at every policy. Our policies are about providing you opportunity, the opportunity to achieve. How do we break the barriers? How do we actually go after the root cause of some of the greatest challenges we have? And nobody wants to do that. They'd rather live off the symptoms of a failed government because it's more profitable.
For sure. Yeah, this definitely contaminated the East African community, and the community wanted this cleaned up. So work hard on it. In addition to that, Mark, Minnesota is becoming #1 in crime. I think we're hanging out #2.
Yeah.
What are you guys doing in the Senate to resolve this crime issues? The governor And the governor and Keith Ellison, they seem to flourish after crime.
Yeah. And now they talk, right? Lip service. They get cheap lip service today. Now they want to focus on crime. Yeah, it's only because it's election season. Think
Right,
about this. Think about it this way. For the last 12 years now, we've had the governors of Minnesota, both Dayton and Walz, talk about the non-prosecution of criminals on a regular basis. From closing freeways, right, under the right to protest. You don't have the right to protest and stop commerce. You don't. We have the greatest opportunity of free speech in the world. You have the right to protest, but you don't have the right to stop commerce. You
right.
don't have the right to destroy somebody's property.
Because
You
we all
don't
have
have that
freedom to
right.
go home.
That has been occurring for the last 12 years. Remember, you might be too young, but with Dayton, when they blocked off the freeways, when they closed the airport, they blocked everything. And they said, well, the governor actually called for the non-prosecution of these, quote, peaceful protesters. Well, then we come all the way into the George Floyd world of the other violent protests and burning the country, burning half the country down.
Right,
Um, very few people were prosecuted, right?
right,
If you would have looked at the crime map, our crime maps were on a hockey stick growth, pretty steady growth.
right.
With the George Floyd event, that crime, if they actually prosecuted people for the amount of violent crime, that hockey stick, it would have went from a hockey stick growth to straight north, but they didn't. Very few people have been prosecuted across the entire country for
Mark,
burning down these countries and looting and stealing.
Mark,
And then you,
especially we the minorities, I don't know. After George, I don't know why we vote for the Democrats after George.
yeah,
Mark,
they willfully let your vital resources burn
city
that
council,
serve you.
city council of the city George Floyd got killed in city of Minneapolis.
Yep,
They were all Democrats. There's only one independent there. The
yep,
rest of them are all Democrats. The
yes,
city
and they,
mayor, the city mayor is a Democrat, same party.
yep,
The county attorney is a Democrat, same party.
yep. Look
The
what they've
house
done,
rep,
Ace.
the house rep from that district is a Democrat.
Yep.
The state house rep is a Democrat. The state senate is a Democrat. The
Congress,
federal, the federal
Congress, Congresswoman's a
congresswoman is a
Democrat.
Democrat. The governor is a Democrat. The
Yep,
state attorney general is a Democrat. From top to bottom, we elect everybody Democrat from one party. And George got killed like that. They refused to
yep.
prosecute. They used
And
them to take the White House to blame
right,
American racism like that.
yep. And think about who they're blaming today. They're blaming the systemic whatever. They're blaming everyone else. There's been no influence of a diverse opinion or thought in that entire community in 35, 40 years. So who is it to blame then? They're it, right? They keep looking at for the man. They is the man, and they're the ones causing it. So when they and this whole garbage of the systemic racism, right? Racism and bias, it exists across everybody. It doesn't matter what your melanin content is, right? But none of those. It doesn't matter, and except for in this environment, if that exists,
Mhm.
think about the education system. Those who are running the government, those who are embedded in it, they would be the purveyors of it. I think they should all resign. I
Mark,
do. I think they should resign.
Mark,
Um,
as a new immigrant to America, man, it's every year is kind of gets me a little bit saddened and saddened in Minnesota.
yeah,
The way the government is looking is slowly acting like a third world government, like
mhm,
constantly, slowly acting like a third world government. When I went back to Oromia, like I went back to the village, that like classic places, and you
sure,
will you will see like huts built from like the 50s and the 60s,
right,
like strong huts, like giant, like they're big, like really big, giant, really strong. And the current modern one they building for themselves is like so tiny, so just little crap. Like the woods they're using, they're not even like spending craft on it.
yeah,
Like how can time ago, like That older ago, the people were putting that kind of work into the house they want to live in, and now they're not building these houses, and they're expecting the government to build American model,
Right.
like American model. So the government has to build it. People are not going to build their own homes anymore. Like liberalism hit
Yep.
Oromia since 1990, like so bad that the
Yeah.
Oromo people inside Ethiopia are not looking to themselves. They're looking to the government for every
Right.
solution. And
Yep.
everywhere
And
around the world, where you see the biggest crime, the biggest genocide, the biggest oppressions, everywhere around the world, that government is really big. That government is in control of everybody's all aspect of their life.
yep.
And that's how the government is in Ethiopia right now.
It,
Big
and
government in charge of everything.
and look what they're doing here. They're trying to kill, as much as they talk about, they're trying to kill individual home ownership and the opportunity, right?
Right.
And for high rise, constant consolidated apartment buildings where you won't own anything, and they want you to be happy not owning anything. They want you to be happy when they'll determine, what energy you get to have, how much energy, how much you should heat your place. Maybe even with the, not solely due to electric cars, but they can decide they just plan on, well, we might not have enough energy. You're just going to drive less. Those are all attacks on the freedom and the dream of America. It's really hard to hold down the immigrant spirit, right? Because you
Right.
come from those first generation, not the first generation, but those foreign born, much like my ancestors. I'm third generation U.S. born. We aren't that far apart, right?
Right.
And so it's hard to hold it down because you've actually been closest to what real oppression is. Or when you think about, you actually remember having to work for food. We
Right.
haven't had to work for food in this country in 70 years, right? We haven't had a hardship that brings us back. These good times leads to vast prosperity, which builds weak men, and then government becomes that attractive alternative. And it's
Right.
not hard. It's just the human spirit. Ace, if you kept getting paid a great wage, or you got by, and you don't have to worry about your housing, you don't have to worry about your food expense. Most people wouldn't work if they didn't have to. But
No,
that's an attack on the human spirit. It's
but when they
attack
sell
on,
it, when they sell it, it looks just like heaven on earth.
oh yeah. But
Like
it's
it's,
attack on the human
I will have
spirit.
everything I wish for. Everything
Yep.
I want, I just get it, just like I'm in heaven.
Yeah. Yeah. And is it what we all aspire to? No. But if you again have multiple generations of the dependency, it is their only normal, right? It is the only thing you know. And then when you keep selling this victimhood mentality that somebody else caused you to be here, but come to us, we'll take care of you.
For
it
sure.
it's oppressive, but it's also really bad for the human spirit.
Right.
The desire to dream and to be taught to prosper, that self-worth is what's built this country and what's really has made it still the greatest country in the world.
For sure.
And then the lack of social health, right? When we are now trying to separate people, isolating people for the last couple of years, we're social beings for our
Right.
own mental health. We require it, well, not only for maybe our biological health, but our mental health in every aspect of what is then community. They're trying to tear every piece of that fabric apart. We're not going to let them, right?
100%.
But
We're
they're just
fighting
taking
Oromia.
advantage.
It was real. It's
Yeah,
easy to fall for a nice thing. We're
yep,
not telling people nice fake things.
yeah.
Like, we're not promising them heaven on earth.
Yeah, I have one of my favorite talk show hosts is Dan Bongino. He does a
Yeah.
great job. He's an intense guy, but
Yeah.
he's got a simple motto, right? It's like the Republicans may not be the cure for all of your problems, but the Democrats are certainly the cause.
For sure.
And he's right. So they couldn't do more harm to this country in their policies if they tried. And that's what we keep fighting every day. And think about in the Minnesota Senate that we've had one vote. Think about what your gas tax would look like alone without that one vote in the Minnesota Senate. They would have
Exactly.
already had an additional 20 cents a gallon. It would
Right.
have gone up in addition to the 28 cents is already there. It
Right.
would have gone up another 20 cents. They would have put an inflator on it. People don't realize that, but they wanted it to an inflator that rises annually.
Right.
Then today they are doing rulemaking because they also adopted California Clean Cars. Now they're doing California Clean Fuels.
Right.
That will add another 30, 40 cents a gallon because of that regulatory requirement. Ace, every Minnesotan would be paying $1 a gallon more just for Minnesota taxes and regulations. Can you
So
afford
one
that?
guy made a difference to have that one
One
majority over.
one seat, absolutely. So we want people to be able to afford to live. We live in the greatest country with the greatest amount of natural resources, and we saw right under good policies that talk about good, clean, reliable energy, we can be that self-reliant, self-sufficient energy producer, and it's the lifeblood for everything that we do and everything we require for our subsistence. Food, think about petroleum products, Ace. There's hundreds of byproducts that you use every day,
For sure.
and precious metals. They don't want to do any of it. And if we can't mine for precious metals here, if we can't drill for oil and natural gas safely here, if we can't do it here, it can't be done safely anywhere else in the world, right?
So,
Yeah,
like, so in these legislations, when you guys debate, sometimes the Democrats say electric car, right? Have they figured out
yeah.
what to do with the battery? Do you guys ask them what we're gonna do with the battery?
They Ace. Here's the problem. You and I and so many others think logically, and there's solutions to all of it. This is more religion like, right? Think about climate change. The climate has changed forever. Do we want clean air? Heck yeah. Clean air, clean water. We've done that. Do you know anybody, Ace, that doesn't want a great fuel efficient car that looks great and performs great? I don't know anybody who doesn't want one. They're building them. The natural market is working well. Electric
Mark,
cars,
I bought a hybrid car.
yeah,
They
yep,
asked me $8,000 for to replace the battery,
yep, yep.
and then
So,
they asked me $500 to dispose the battery.
right, yeah,
So
and the precious minerals required, Ace, for everyone. There aren't enough precious minerals in the world, and our electrical grid. Remember, it would be one thing if you were growing your power generation exponentially, because everything we do is going to require more and more electricity. Think about everything you have today that now consumes electricity on a 24-hour basis in your own home, right? So then you think about power as our lifeblood. So heck, Minnesota used to be really, really competitive in power for industry.
right,
Do you know, Ace, one mine in Minnesota, one mine in Minnesota consumes 320 megawatts of power 7 days a week, 24 hours a day. It's more than the city of Minneapolis.
right.
So the energy costs for them, like paper mills, we only have one paper mill left in the state. They left. They cannot afford to do business in this state. We lose as taxpayers and we lose as a nation. The mining, the precious metals for the windmills and computers and all those things. You can't have everything we have and not mine for those precious metals right here. We're sitting on billions of dollars of precious
Wow.
metals in northern Minnesota. But we need power. Electric cars, for people that want them, great. I don't know many people who can
This
afford
is
them.
still in trial. It's been over 30 years in trial. They have not
Yeah.
resolved it. Mark,
Well,
Mark, if I buy a car, Mark, especially brand new, I'm gonna drive to the Grand Canyon. I'm gonna drive around. I'm gonna drive somewhere. I'm not gonna freaking keep on renting cars if I have a brand new car, right? I don't want to be in the
yes.
middle of the highway and the battery dies on me. And I
Or
don't want to pull
Ace.
over to the next gas station, plug it in, and sleep at a gas station for 2 hours for the car to charge.
Right,
Who's gonna do
right.
that when we're on the road?
And the infrastructure to do that, it'll take time, and some of that's coming. But the I think the car and the ability and freedom to move is as much of the American culture as anything we have. Ace, if you want to drive across country with a 5 minute refueling, you can do that.
Yeah,
Heck, I think on an average vacation, 38 million people hop in their cars and travel across the
exactly.
country, and not just our commute, what we do locally. Um,
Will
It
not
is a
more have to pull up to rest area like truck stoppers and sleep in our little cars.
and then Ace. So
What the
where do
little
you
car charges for 2 3 hours.
Ace in Minneapolis, right? Minneapolis is moving to high density housing. Where will those chargers exist? Because they're not even requiring the apartments now to have parking spaces,
Right,
right? The average American family has a couple cars, right? Where are you going to park them? Where would a fueling station be for St. Paul and Minneapolis when for out of town residents? Where
right.
would that be? The acreage, the space, and the time required. It works for some people. It does. I hear they're great cars, probably really cool to drive, but it might be just a short-term solution until you get to hydrogen,
Exactly.
which we need a lot of power to be able to do all of those things to make sure we have clean transportation and we have the ability to live and afford our food, right? Think about the transportation costs today, Ace, on this movement
Very
to
expensive.
electric cars. The trucking industry or California, we adopted California clean cars. They did it without the
Right,
legislature. They want to tell manufacturers what cars they have to sell. So they might tell Ford, you have to sell 7% of your cars have to be electric. And the
right,
reality is they don't care whether they can't force you to sell something that nobody wants.
right,
And so if they don't, it's like everything else. It's like carbon credits and all those things. In
right.
their world, it's okay to pollute in
I
their
call it
world
I call it
as
corruption credits.
yeah, as long as you pay more federal taxes or state taxes, it's okay for you to pollute.
Right,
Because paying more taxes doesn't eliminate right pollution. So yeah, they don't care, and you get tied up, and many get tied up. There are solutions for all of these things, but adopting Minnesota or California's clean car is fuel standards, and now California is implementing for commercial trucks.
for
If you
sure.
want to see every single product you have, keep attacking the energy sector, keep attacking the petroleum sector, and this inflation will be long-term inflation, and middle income and low income families are going to be crushed. And look what's happening. There's more restaurants and those things are closing today. They're continuing to go. They can't operate. The margin, the cost, labor, people aren't working,
For sure.
because life's too good. They're being paid. They're figured out how to eat without participating in the workforce like they used to.
Right.
It's going to have devastating impacts on the
For
entire
sure.
country, and
For
we got to
sure.
get out of this. We got to have good energy, reliable, clean, but we need a lot more of it, and we need to be that energy producer and leader across the world.
They're killing inspiration at every level, Mark.
Absolutely,
Education. Talk to me, Mark. In Minnesota, there are too many youth, too many preschoolers on a waiting list. We have this
yeah.
much surplus. We have the education budget. Why are the Democrats not getting these kids into a classroom?
Yeah, when you look at in fact, the public school enrollment's been dropping pretty significantly because of everything that they've done over the last, now it's culminated over the last 10, 15 years. When you look at the outcomes, and think about, I look at where we're at today is we're now starting to reap the benefits. I don't think they're
Right.
benefits, but in 2013, the Democrats had full control of the House, the Senate, and the governor's office,
Mm-hmm.
and they've removed graduation standards. Do you know we don't have graduation standards for you to get a diploma in Minnesota? And look what they've done. And they've done it, and again, many of it's, I think it could be deemed very racist. They've removed and lowered the standards because of the equity or the performance gap between young Black and brown children, right? It's the worst in the nation under the very same people who led all of it. And so what do they do by lowering the standards? They guarantee that those kids are not going to get an education. When you set the bar so low and you're telling somebody based on the melanin of their skin that they're unable to receive or obtain an education to be successful, that's garbage. That's pure garbage. And they don't want to go after the root cause. We need to find, right? We need families. We need to make
I
sure and
yeah
support
yeah, and
you.
then also, man, so many great people resigning. from Education Services.
Yeah,
Even Coach McKenzie from North Minneapolis resigned.
yeah.
The
The
legendary basketball coach resigned because
when
of the
you
project
see,
dramas.
look what they've done, Ace. Look in the St. Paul, Minneapolis schools. We don't want the school resource officers, right? Think about safety and security for your children in the school. And the violence. They've taken away the control under these stupid policies that don't allow a teacher to intervene, or that the teachers, when they're assaulted, they're not provided, this lawlessness is kind of permeated those schools. It's just a detriment
Mhm.
to everybody. It's not a learning environment anymore. And it's all the same people who've set those policies. And now we've got the garbage content and what they think the school should be providing is from an education perspective. Think about that garbage. And it's not
Oh
moving the
man,
needle. It's not
it's
moving the needle.
very unfortunate. A coach like that, when a coach like that resigns because of
Yeah.
the rules the politicians made, and these politicians are Democrat.
Yep.
That's a black
Yeah.
legendary coach, man. That's a wake up call to all minorities to vote strong, to stay conservative, and take care of your community. Otherwise, once they get really big, it's very hard to stop them.
It is, and you're seeing that push on the public school system. So many people have just opted out. They're going to do homeschooling. They're doing small community groups, right? 5 parents are getting together, and one's teaching once a week, right? Changing their work habits, because the education and for homeschooling, look at their performance. They're performing at an extremely high level, and they're doing it 4.5 hours a day, and then they're teaching real life skills on top of it. We still have the best infrastructure to be able to teach and provide in the public school system the best education. But
Right.
think about it, they're dropping accelerated programs for the top performers.
Yeah.
So they're lowering the standards. And what does that do? That just lowers the performance requirements and expectations for everybody in the school. That doesn't benefit a single person.
They're stopping
And
a kid that wants to excel so it can be equal to a kid that
at,
doesn't want to excel.
they want equality, and that means everybody's going to be equally less intelligent and have a lower grade
I think
education.
you need to address LeBron James. You gotta tell
Well,
him. You gotta tell LeBron James you cannot score more than 10 points because everybody else
well,
gotta get 10 points.
why are there not 4'10" basketball players?
Yeah.
It would be more equitable, right? Wouldn't that be equity?
Every team can
And
only have one guy over 7 feet.
right,
We gotta
yeah.
get all these 3 feet shorties too. We gotta get them in basketball court.
Ace, those, if you start to talk about those very policies that they're promoting today, and when you apply it to everything else that's not within their political agenda, none of it makes sense. And it doesn't, and it never will. But it's just a way to divide people, and it's like, and then divide by your melanin, the things you can't control. If you follow Education Ace, one of the things that I thought was really cool, Carrie Levin did a story on the Lucy Laney Elementary School in North Minneapolis, lowest performing school in the entire state of Minnesota, right? Mostly black and brown, mostly black. And so, but it's a community school, right? I grew up at a community school. You should be going to school with your
Right.
kids and friends and family you live with. Our schools are actually the foundation for community. But they did Maury Fresselbein, I think that's how you pronounce her name. She was the principal there at Lucy Laney. She's now the principal at North High. But she grew up right in the neighborhood. Her story is kind of amazing, a really hard life, but she made it, and she came back to give. Ace, you should watch that. Everybody should watch that. It's a documentary. It's called Love Them First. What she convinced the staff to do is to go out in the summer to find one person who cares about that student, right? Wrap around services to make sure to get that student, that someone cares, and then that way that student can be prepared so they can receive an education. That's what we need. We need more Maury's to be able to convince the community that
Sure.
we need people from the community to wrap around, because only the community are the ones that are going to be able to hold each other accountable to make sure that student's ready for school, right? We also talk about healthy male role models for each of those kids, that if they don't live with their dad, we need a healthy role model. That's exactly what they did. That school now has a waiting list to get in, and their scores are rising, and those kids are going
Right.
to be successful.
For
That's
sure.
the foundational stuff that we have to kind of not blow up the school system, but right today, it's so restrictive because of the licensure requirements. They limit people's access to these jobs because of licensure requirements, and none of them prove that you're going to be a great teacher,
Right.
right? And so you need somebody who cares, and we got a lot of great teachers who care. But these
Mhm.
root cause issues, and mostly St. Paul, Minneapolis, right, where you have the concentration by choice um, of the people who need the most help. We have tons of dollars, tons of wraparound services. All those nonprofits we talked about, they're all in St. Paul, Minneapolis. And
100%.
so there's some cool projects out there. I think that's the type of model we have to really look at and say, we have to go after the root cause. How do we empower people and make sure that during the summer we
Mm-hmm.
go out and find community? I'd trade 4, 5, 6, 10, whatever it is of those licensed teacher positions
For sure.
for people in the community who care, who
Mm-hmm.
can be the ones to do the wraparound services and go out and do the door knock to find the one person, and really can have the conversation about accountability. Because if the community is not going to do it, the teachers sure are not going to. They are not equipped to be the parent, the guardian, and the full-time provider for that child. Nor do we want them to be.
For sure.
But when you look at it, you should watch it, Ace. It's a really cool
100%. I will watch
documentary.
it. I will watch
Channel
it.
11, Channel 11 did it. It's
Yeah.
called The Lucy Laney Story, Love Them First. And you'll
100.
see there, and it's like, it really depicts the story of the struggle and the family structure that those kids have. We got to disrupt that, right? We need to make sure they wrap around and get back to what a kind of a nuclear family looks like. Get a healthy male role model in there and make sure mom's good. And those exist. Nobody wants to deal with it and really kind of go after the root cause. So, and then not having graduation standards. Ace, I've got a prison in my district. I've got Rush City Prison, and I asked them because um, they are full. One of the very few prisons that are full because they let a whole bunch of people out. By the way, talking about crime, Governor
Mm-hmm.
Walz let a third of the prison population out during the
Mm-hmm.
pandemic just because he thought it would be good.
Yeah.
Um, but up at the prison, I had just come off a tour of a St. Paul high school where I find out that they don't their grading standards are, if you turn your assignment in, you get a 4. So you get an A just for turning your assignment in. What the heck is that going to do for their educational opportunity? It's nothing. And so I went to the prison. So we're talking, they actually have a pretty decent education process, trades and some training, so they get some skills on the way out. So I asked the guy who runs education. I said, how many people in the Rush City Prison actually have a high school diploma or a GED? You have any idea how many people in that prison or a prison that have a high school diploma?
I'm hoping at least 70%.
Actually, 80% have a high school diploma. It was
That's what's
much
up.
higher than I anticipated.
Yeah, that's really
But
good.
but when we spoke to them, they said they found out that many of them have a diploma, but most of them don't have an education.
Yeah.
So we've lowered standards that we're giving graduate or high school
Yeah, you went
diplomas
to
and
school to just get a name behind the paper. No knowledge.
GEDs without the education. So that's why you have to have standards. And so now that prison system is actually going to look and say, we've got to test everybody to find out where they are academically to make sure that when they leave prison, they truly have an education.
Right.
That's what they should have done in our high schools.
For
Lowering
sure.
the standards, again, hurts the very people. And
100%.
again, everybody talks about black, brown people. That's who it's hurt the most. Anybody in that socioeconomic status that doesn't have the nuclear family, right? A healthy dad, all of them are performing at the same level, right?
Right.
They are. It doesn't discriminate in that manner. So we've got to tackle those things, and we have all the programs in place. The problem is it's too profitable getting these kids identified and from a special needs perspective. Ace, do you know how that St. Paul, Minneapolis have almost twice the school funding of a rural school? They do it
And
through they
food
do it through
processors.
categoricals. They try to get you identified
Right.
and ID'd as being special needs. Guess who feeds off special needs? All those same non-profiteers that we
Right.
talked about before.
Exactly.
They come in as supposed to be the wraparound service, but they're not being successful. They're not
Mhm.
improving the outcomes of those children. So,
And I know
uh,
exactly what you're talking about. And I've seen them they call the specialists too. They be trying to drive from school to school,
yep.
which hours they waste on the road, and just
And what it does is that
very unfortunate.
it opens the door for all of the entitlement service for them to wrap around and get the
Right.
dependency right at the entry into the school system. And so to me that has to stop, because it
Right.
just is we need to have high competitive standards to make sure kids get a good,
Yeah.
great education. But look at the garbage they're focusing
The
on in
most
the
important
schools.
one is, man, keep fighting, man. Keep that school choices
Oh,
open.
yeah, and we look at today, the school choice, the curriculum
That
quote.
one is a must because I have three kids coming up and they're very athletic. They play sports. I
Awesome.
make them. I'm gonna, make them do their homework. They're just starting
Yeah,
public school, so
yeah. And
they're
that's what
either
it
gonna
takes.
go to if they're athletic. When they get to high school level, if their athletic is promising, I'm gonna get them to the best high school teams.
Yeah,
Like, I need to have that choice.
yeah.
They
And
can they can make me stay here if the schools around here don't want to be serious in the sports.
yeah, and that's the part that is that, there's the big tussle, that we haven't funded school education. $19 billion of state
Right,
dollars go into the education, another $6 billion from those just schools assessed through the county property tax. And then there's another billion, I think billion and a half of federal dollars that comes in. That's a lot of money.
it is.
And the more money, and that doesn't count the $3 billion they got during COVID, right? To not teach students during the
Right.
pandemic. And so there's plenty of money. We've funded them in, pretty significantly over the last 6 years. The outcomes aren't improving. And so it's not a money issue. It's about the structure and a lot of the things that, creating a healthy, safe environment, having school resource officers, all those things are required to make sure the kids that want a great education have a safe
Right.
environment to do it.
For sure. For sure. Keep fighting. Last one, Mark. Election. Let me know,
Yeah.
Mark, why. Why should the minorities vote conservative? Why should we vote red, Mark?
Yeah, I think we talked a little bit about it. When you look at the policies that Governor Walz at the federal level and at the state level, literally everyone there is hurting all opportunity for all Minnesotans. You think about the education system we just spoke about. It's
Right.
been led by the very same people, and the outcomes have gone down every single year. The the focus on everything except providing the opportunity to achieve greatness, right? Everybody has that. True equality is that opportunity, but you can't have, right, equality without, they want equity without equal input. You have to
Right.
participate. You have to participate, and it's good for the human spirit, mind, and literally your overall health as a human being as you progress through the life cycle. When you look at the policy, ours are about how do we make sure that government isn't taking more of your dollars than necessary, funding critical things in government, making sure that government is accountable and that we have the monies we need, because government doesn't get to make money. At least at the state level, we're not printing our own money, right?
Right.
So we need to honor and respect that our agencies are performing, um, and making sure they're doing the things necessary, for when it is the role of government. And our goal is to restrain the government to make sure it's within its constitutional bounds. It's not the end all be all parent for all people. It's not supposed to be. And you see the oppressive the policies. Think about all those energy things we talked about. It's going to affect every single thing you buy and consume. They talk about nationally, and our governor supports it, right? They want to eliminate oil. Well,
Mhm.
the world consumes 100 million barrels of oil a day. We consume about 22 million barrels of oil a day. Everything you eat is a derivative of it. Everything you consume, everything you wear, your house, your car,
Mark, it's okay
doesn't
though.
exist without it.
We don't have to use the oil one in the U.S., but it's okay. We can go drill it somewhere else, and it's not gonna affect the environment if we drill it in
Uh,
Africa or the Middle East or South America, right?
yeah,
We live in
we're
our own island in the U.S. according to the Democrats,
I
and we do
know.
not pollute our own little island. But we should go pollute
Yeah.
China. From China, if they pollute it, it's okay. From Russia, if they pollute it, it's okay, and they can just ship
Ch-
the oil to us.
China puts a coal plant online every 2 a week, I believe. A new coal plant. So, is it 2 week? No, I think it's well 52.9. Yeah.
It's funny,
Um,
like when,
almost two,
when
almost
Joe
two a
Biden
week.
canceled the key pipe and
Yep.
then approved the Russia one. I
Yep. Yep.
was like, what?
And now that one, now the
And
Nord Stream
that's for the
2.
betterment of the environment. He did that for the betterment of the environment.
Yeah. So when you look at it, the things that haven't changed that are important, Ace, education is really top. Parents want choice. Parents don't want the schools indoctrinating. They want them to teach. They're right. They don't want them teaching that you're an oppressor or you're being oppressed based on who you are, the melanin in your content. They want them to focus on a good core education. It's about safety, right? The safety of all. When you think about St. Paul, Minneapolis, and it's the safety issue reaches throughout the entire state. It's when you don't prosecute criminals, they become very emboldened and the crimes are everywhere. The scale is different, right? But do you know that carjackings, when you read the statistics on carjackings and armed carjackings, the statistics don't go back very far because they were so infrequent, they weren't tracking them. Think about that. They're so
Sure.
infrequent, we weren't tracking them. Look what they've allowed it to do without having any penalties. And so crime and safety and then the economy. We're going to focus on making sure that we can do everything we can to make sure you keep as much money as you have, create an environment that's good for
Man,
jobs.
just about a week ago, my neighbor walks up and his Cadillac converter is gone.
Yeah. But Ace, don't worry.
It's great.
We're gonna set up a government program and we're gonna paint your converter orange. Do you think anybody cares? They're not selling these. They're not. It's like the dumbest program in the world. And now they're selling.
I couldn't believe it when I saw that in the reading.
Now they're doing. You can get them etched. It's like nobody cares. They got a black market. It's not going to the scrap yards that people have. They've got a black market to sell those precious metals, and so they need to prosecute them for stealing them. Think about it, Ace. Think about the
Mark,
car
when the
thefts.
guy stores something, 40,000 of them,
Yeah.
he's shipping it abroad. He's shipping
Yeah,
it somewhere.
that's exactly it, Ace. So the shipping containers and shipping is where they should be tracking them. It's not scrap metal dealers in this state or I doubt it's in any of the 5 state region close to us. But think about your car. They said, well, it's just property. Yeah, but if it's your only way to get to work, right? Ace, somebody steals your car that's maybe it's $8,000 car, but it's your $8,000 car
Right.
and nobody has a right to that. And again, it hurts the middle income and the poorest the most. So we have to get back to prosecuting crime and making sure that those, because it's again a very small
Mark,
group of people.
my, my shows like David Letterman's show, like whenever I talk about the Democrats, everything they do constantly makes me laugh. Let's just say they paint Cadillac converter orange, right?
Yes,
Let's just say, a crackhead, who cut that thing, sold it to me for $40 and he went and did his crack with $40 and I put that Cadillac converter on my car and fixed my car. Let's just say that. Who's gonna go under the hood like that and check if that thing is orange or gray? How do
nobody.
they, how do they even know it's used on my car part?
Nobody, Ace. That it's all to make you feel good in light of actually solving the problem. Prosecute. And these guys are emboldened, right? They're doing it during the day, they're doing it during the night, they could care less. But even worse, they're stealing your cars. They're doing armed carjackings and still
Mark,
not having prosecution.
this is why I'm sad, Mark. Like liberalism took over Oromia like the way it's taking over America right now in
Yeah.
the 90s. When nothing took over, like is bad, Mark. Like is really, really bad. So
Yep.
the Ethiopian prime minister now, he literally said every language is gonna be a federal language. And then people are like, where is the budget gonna come from? Like you know. So
Yeah.
like every time he's like everybody loved it because they're liberals. They think like everybody's language is going to be spoken in the government. It's not possible. Like
Yeah.
when the president speaks, that means we're going to have like 82 interpreters lined up.
Right.
And then we have
Yep.
to have 82 different TV screens. Like stuff is not possible. It might sound good to your ear when he says like, every language is going to be a better language. Like
Ace.
everybody's fighting. Everybody has different cultures, so they're fighting for their culture. And he comes and
Ace.
he tells them, "You're all gonna have it your way."
Ace.
It's not
I
over
I've
now.
talked about for 35 years. One of the things that they've done in Minnesota is think about all the immigrant populations of the past, right? You came here for the American dream, right?
Right.
There aren't many people. There's many people fighting to get in this country, right? As anywhere else in the world, right? There's no other country that has more people wanting to get here because prosperity is truly available. And I've said it forever. You talk about the language, right? A language accommodation. What does it do? It typically prevents assimilation and your ability to thrive within that country, right? So you will adapt. But what have we done? Government has said, oh wait, look what we've done. We put everything what in 50, 60, 80 languages today. And then we have a whole school system now that does English as second. Remember, that's a categorical,
Right.
Ace. More funding for you, and the longer you don't acquire the language, you become vulnerable, right, to those that would prey on you within your own community first, and then you're elderly, right? All of those things occur, and so I always do because when I talk to the world in academia, those that have college degrees, I always ask them, what's the best way to acquire a new language? And they just jump to it and say assimilation. There's a Mandarin Chinese, I'm sorry, an immersion school. There's a German one here. There's a Mandarin Chinese one there. And I said, yeah, I kind of knew that. How come it doesn't? Then how come it doesn't work for English? Oh, wait, because it's more profitable to take the path we have, and they can create longer lasting dependency if you don't adopt the language, right? First generation, right? You're going to learn that language, but they do everything they can to prevent the assimilation under the guise of kindness and compassion, which it's neither,
For sure.
right? So
Sure.
it is amazing, but we've seen what it is. You see a socialist behavior, right? That we've seen it fail over and over and over and over. And they just think they've rebranded Democrat socialist, a kinder, gentler form of oppression.
Right.
It's still oppression and it won't work. And government, when they take over the controls and means, productivity and your prosperity go down the toilet.
Go
And
down
that's
the toilet.
not who we are. But we're at a precipice, right? We need to make sure that we're focusing and making sure everybody has the ability to live a free life, have the best quality of life, create jobs, have an environment that becomes attractive for people to grow jobs and build jobs and businesses in this state. We truly are. I think we're still one of the best states in the country. We have the best of everything in the world here. We also have all of those threats that we see at the national level, in Congress. I mean, you follow Congress, whatever crazy bill you've heard them pass, there's a version of that which is passed through the Minnesota House, the Democrat House, and only stopped by the Republicans.
For
that
sure.
one seat. From elections, laws to changing those things to remove And so there's no checks and balances to continuing and perpetuating this lawlessness environment we have, trying to change the statutes so you don't prosecute, qualified immunity. It's only going to lead to fewer and fewer law enforcement. And we can't continue. We have to get to the point where they're respected, that they're high quality, right? Not abusive, but and they're good actors. We can do that. And you can have safety in your community, and you don't have to worry about, you shouldn't have to worry about random gunfire in St. Paul or Minneapolis. It's unbelievable that you're supposed to just accept that, you know, and you're lucky you didn't get hit by a stray bullet, but you know, it lands somewhere. It's your car, it's your house, you know, and you look at the children that have been killed by random gunfire. It's not a world we have a choice. And it's not the choice I want to make that anybody has to live in that environment, nor should anybody, no matter where you live, should never have to live in that environment. And I think that's the difference. The current elected leaders in the Democrat side want to keep that environment, and it's
100%.
only going to get worse. So
100%. They want to keep us dependent on
absolutely.
them. We don't want to be like that. So Mark, this is my highlight, and then you can take your last highlight too, and then we close the show. So to my minorities, especially new immigrants, especially those from East Africa, well, particularly the Oromos, like the flag behind me. This is America, and this is a country. This got a territory, just like us, the Oromos with Oromia. We got a territory. Trying to get our country back from Ethiopia, so the Oromo people can stop starving and stop getting politically prosecuted by Ethiopia. Every 5 years, man, they renew prosecution, because we don't have a true Oromos in Ethiopian politics. So every election will come, and millions, 60 million Oromos will want to get out and vote for Oromo politicians. But the Ethiopian government will throw them in jail, and only one party will run. So to stop this, that's why in America they fought for a smaller government. That's why they gave people the power to own gun, because of their freedom of speech. They don't get killed. They can defend themselves. When we call the police officer, Mark, by the time the police officer gets to the crime scene, the criminal is gone 90% of the time, 99% of the time. They're usually gone. That is why it's important that people defend themselves. That is why people like Mark Koran, they fight for us in the government for freedom. Once we're free, we can build the schools for ourselves, especially the Oromo people. You know, every school we built it for ourselves. The Ethiopian government never really built anything for us. Nothing. So when an individual is free, he can build himself a nice house, a big house, a small house. If this individual is free, he don't have to cut the tree down. You know, the trees on our map, Mark, represent something God made for us to cherish it, for us to cut it down, build a nice house with it, for us to pick up the seed, plant another tree. God didn't make the tree for me to just hug all the time, 24 hours. He made it for me to cut it down and build a nice house with it. And keep the seed and plant the tree. So my son can cut it down and build a house with it too. And my son will do the same thing. And this how life's supposed to go. But nowadays, I'm supposed to go to jail for cutting a tree down. But they're going to rule it on me in the house that is built from a tree. So we don't want to be that unfortunate as minorities in America. We should be voted red, because we came to America for freedom, and they represent freedom. And that's what I have to say, Mark. What is your last 30-second, 1-minute shot before we close the show?
Ace, we covered a lot. I appreciate the opportunity. And, for me, it's always about just sharing our experience. And we truly are just there to fight and make sure that we have the best state in the world with the best economic opportunities available. And that helps every single person in the state. The stuff we talk about, it shouldn't even be in our dialogue. It's so crazy. Get back to the foundation, what made this country great. And for every immigrant population, it's who we are. I'm third generation. I grew up in the house my great-grandfather, when he landed in the country. My grandfather was born in that house, and it's only about 5 blocks west of the state capitol. So I'm a city boy. And so we take that
like
entire
Midway area?
Frogtown.
Oh, so, wow, that is Midway area. Next Midway, yeah.
Frogtown, Midway is a little bit further west, and that's Midway and Snelling and Minnehaha is where I raised my children. And so,
Wait,
um,
did you just say Snelling in Minnehaha?
that is correct.
Maybe I'm living in your grandpa's house.
Yeah, no, that was where I raised my children, but my parents' house was on Thomaston, Virginia, in right just west of the
Uh,
capital as well. So, but
right. When we get off the live, I'll tell you where my address is.
yeah, but at Ace, we really are. We want to make sure that we operate and get back to the constitutional structure of government and make sure it serves its role, it serves its role well, and that you have the freedom to achieve greatness, and that's what we're all
For
about.
sure.
So,
For sure.
Ace, I appreciate it.
I appreciate you too, my friend. Good luck to the red team in November.
Thank you.
Let's
Everybody
win
get
it.
out and vote. Everybody knows somebody who hasn't voted.
For sure.
Give our candidates the opportunity to prove that we'll
For
we'll
sure.
make life affordable and great in Minnesota.
For sure. Like my friend Abu posted down here, please do follow, share, and subscribe to Oromo Affairs. We will keep talking to make sure the Democrats don't cheat us.